Hi, everyone. Welcome to PRNEWS Live. I'm Nicole Schumann, Senior Editor at PRNEWS, and I'd like to thank you for joining us again. If you have any questions today, as usual, just pop them into the comments and we'll get to them throughout the chat. And today I'd like to introduce our special guest, Brandon Espinosa. He's the Vice President of Brand and Partnerships for the Bronx Brewery here in New York, so we're happy to have him. Almost 5 years ago, Brandon became the first Latino to work at the Bronx Brewery, where he began managing community engagement events in the venue and later became the brewery's VP of Brand and Partnerships, where he was able to help build the brand he always envisioned in the Bronx, centered around culture, community, and inclusivity. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Yeah, no problem. Now, first, as we always do, I'd like to chat about an article we featured this week in PRNEWS, and this might be right up your alley, Brandon. It is by contributor Yesenia, I should have pronounced this beforehand, Yesenia Reynoso, okay, founder and principal of Why Communicate. Reynoso wrote Hispanic Diversity in PR, a slow work in progress. And she looks at Hispanic Heritage Month, especially as it concludes this week, acknowledging the underrepresentation of Latinx in media and the importance of including a Hispanic presence in every brand outreach. So, Brandon, I believe you come from a Latinx background. How has this impacted the work that you do as well as the work the Bronx Brewery does?
Absolutely. So definitely a hot topic right now, and it's been a hot topic, I think, for quite some time. And as someone who identifies with the Latinx community, I think it's imperative for companies and businesses to be tapping in and paying attention to what this community is doing, what they like, where they're at, and how to meet them and engage with them in a meaningful and authentic way. So personally, a lot of my work and the work that I've done here at the Bronx Brewery has stemmed from that identity of being Latinx and my experiences, my lived experiences, whether growing up here in the Bronx or more familial in my travels. So with that being said, that lens has been the catalyst for the work that I've done here at the Bronx Brewery. And it's a matter of looking at the community that we are located in, right? So we are in the South Bronx, which is a predominantly Hispanic Latinx community, right? A huge, rich history of immigration to this borough. And we're so fortunate to have the namesake of the borough in our name. And we serve such a diverse population of people here. So when we were looking at the brand and figuring out where to take it and what we wanted to be synonymous with, and where we are in the craft beer industry, it was important to remain authentic to that community, and also engage with that community in a meaningful way, right? And so when I say that community, it's my community, it's our community. And I think if you look at the leaders across the Bronx Brewery organization, that is the lens and the feeling amongst everyone here. So with that being said, I started here in March of 2017. And one of the first events I threw here was a salsa night. Again, highlighting the rich culture of salsa and the birth of salsa here in the Bronx, often referred to as El Condado de la Salsa. And that has just kind of trickled down. And as we evolved as a company over the years, and have realized where we are in this space of craft beer, which is predominantly a white male space, we have really began to focus on why we do this work and not what and how we do it, which is very different than probably most other breweries. And that why is kind of the driver and the heart and soul of the work that we do here. So with that being said, you know, our ethos and mantra around everything we've done, whether it's been through the beers we've made, through the events we've thrown, through the charitable partners that we have had, through the creatives we've worked with. And I could give different examples of how we've done that. It's been around this mantra of being bigger than beer, and the liquid being kind of the starting point and the catalyst to everything else that we do as a brand and as a company, and really believing in beer's power to bring people together.
I like that, be bigger than beer, because it does seem that, you know, one of the great things that's come out of industry and new industry in urban centers are these breweries that are, popping up in all sorts of cities. I mean, you look at Denver, Colorado, and that's a whole industry now, the craft beer industry. They kind of started it over there. But even when you go to cities, I've been to Miami, I've been, down in Atlanta, breweries are really becoming a heart and soul of the community and bringing in everybody. As you were saying, I've never had a salsa night at a brewery, so that's really cool. Something that, you're taking a part of the community and, introducing it and integrating yourself into, you might be a new company, not you guys specifically, but when a brewery inserts itself into a community or introduces itself, it should, look to take those cultural aspects from where it's coming from. And so, Brandon, what is your personal advice for other communications professionals, particularly when it comes to inclusive messaging for the Hispanic community? How can they, look to include more of this messaging in what they're doing?
Sure. I mean, I think it first starts with like researching and really understanding that community. I am fortunate enough to be Latinx and really understand that community. But regardless, whatever you're doing, it's important to really understand. Another piece of advice that I would give is it's important to authentically engage with that community and give them a seat at the table, right? Listen to their lived experiences, their past experiences, especially as you're building strategy and figuring out how to communicate with this demographic. I think sometimes, we think we know and we don't have no idea. And so it's really important to identify who are the stakeholders in this community. What do they have to say? Because as you know, more opinions are better than one, and you're able to get a holistic approach to the different things and also realize that there may be things that you haven't thought about. So that's always my biggest piece of advice is invite those stakeholders to the table and invite them out to dance, right? Inviting them to the table is one thing, but invite them out to dance. And when I say invite them out to dance, I'm saying like have meaningful engagement with them, bring them into those activations, into those community initiatives so that it's really, a thought out, in-depth experience activation. And outside of activations to what we're speaking about today, communications, right? We live in a day and age where things are changing constantly, right? This idea of Hispanic Heritage Month versus Latinx Heritage Month, right? And, identity, whether it's, religious identity, sexual orientation, whether it's origin, there's all of these different things that play in our world. And I think the best resource and best asset are those that are part of that community, identify with that community, and deserve a voice in those rooms as you build strategy, whether it's communications, whether it's events, activations, branding, what have you.
Yeah. And, you bring up an interesting point in, mentioning Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month. What can you just describe what the differences might be, or in branding, or what people should be using, or just I'm curious. I'm sure people are out there as well, the appropriate use.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could give you my understanding of it. There's a lot of information and articles out there around it. Hispanic is a term that the U.S. government gave to a population of people, right? So it's not all encompassing. The idea of Latin is of Latin descent, which is a more all encompassing term, and one that I think most people of Latin descent identify with, right, as Latinos. And the X piece, right, is a notion and a direct kind of understanding that it's not just male, it's not just female. It could be any sort of identity that one has with that term. And so the Latin X is this all-encompassing bucket of all people that identify as Latinos of Latin descent. So I think it's, as Latinos and Latinxers, right, as we, get older and as we become more aware and in tune, it's this idea of embracing our culture and our identity wholeheartedly and really bringing that to the table and wanting to have a term that really identifies us and not one that was bestowed upon us. And a lot of this comes from like the census and whatnot, if you go back in U.S. history.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people that aren't of that background or, working within that community don't understand that. So I appreciate you bringing that up and explaining it. I think that's really important. So now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the brewery. And it's been a challenging year for everyone, no matter what industry you're in. Thankfully, people have really needed beer over the past year to get through many things. But, in your position, what has changed regarding your job over the past year? And what priorities have surfaced regarding branding and what you do there?
Sure. So fortunate enough to have made it to the other side, more or less, of the pandemic. Probably one of the toughest things that we faced as a company in the 10-year history of what we've been building. And, as a small team, we all wear many hats here. So, as the VP of brand and partnerships, it's one of those things that you check your title at the door and you jump in and throw your hands in wherever, they're needed. And that was very, very evident during the pandemic. And so, two things that come to mind, coming out of the pandemic and kind of navigating through the pandemic in terms of your question of like what changed. I think we were able to realize the silver lining here. So rather than seeing the glass as half empty, we saw it as half filled. And we were able to realize a new vertical of our business that is a direct to consumer model, right, called BXB Go. And so as tap rooms shut down and venues shut down, we had to figure out how to remain in touch and engage with our consumer. And so we launched an e-commerce platform where we ship product across New York State, allowed people to pick up. And we also delivered locally via a lot of the apps that do local delivery. And that's a piece of our business that is still going today. And then from there, we started a subscription model. So now if you love what we do and you're a fan of our product, you're able to subscribe to our BXB Go subscription model and receive monthly limited releases before the general public does. So two new avenues of our business that we probably wouldn't have realized as quickly as we did if it weren't for the pandemic. In terms of like branding and like what has changed in my world, it's been remaining nimble and flexible, but fortunate enough to work for a company that has really doubled down on the values of what this company represents. So the values that really drive what we do here are community, inclusivity, and creativity. And we were fortunate enough to really double down on that during the pandemic. And so what do I mean by that? It was really engaging and continuing to meet our community where they're at. So, we had a Cheers to Heroes drive, right, where we donated over 10,000 cans of beer to frontline workers that were getting us through this crisis and this pandemic. We donated beers to those that were protesting during the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Things that we think are important to our society and very important to us. Coming out of the pandemic, we, started a collaboration with Beer Culture, which is an organization based out of Florida that looks to create more opportunities for people that identify with the BIPOC community, so Black, Indigenous people of color, from underserved communities. And as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, craft beer being such a predominantly white male space, those opportunities aren't readily available. And we have one of the premier internship programs here in the US to create that avenue for those that are interested in the production side and getting a foot into the craft beer industry. We also launched a public arts initiative. So those that are familiar with our brand know that music and art are a big part of our brand and our identity. And so it's an opportunity to continue working with local creatives and giving them a platform to amplify their voices, right, through art. So that public arts initiative we launched this year coming out of the tail end of the pandemic, and it's an opportunity to put artwork all over New York City to beautify the communities that these creatives have a relationship with. We continue to double down on our Up and Comer series, right, which is our platform that gives a voice to local creatives who are, incredible, but don't have the platform to really amplify their work. So we're creating beer cans with them, and in that vein, still tying it to a charitable community component where we're donating a net percentage of proceeds from sales of these beer to go to a variety of different nonprofits across New York City and beyond. So this is, these are a few ways that we have continued to double down and invest. And I would say, it starts with the leadership, but it's really driven by our community. And we're fortunate enough to be in a community that is the Bronx and more largely New York City that really supports our work and has invested in us. And we look to do the same thing and continue to invest in them.
Yeah, and that's an interesting strategy. You guys might be a smaller organization in terms of, communications or, PR and those sorts of things. But your partnerships really seem to be quite a strength in what you're doing and getting the word out in what you're doing. So, you seem to work with a lot of different organizations, a lot of other, different groups. For other organizations that are looking to work with partnerships, what are some best practices you could suggest, or when they're looking at their strategy and saying, okay, we should, it would be great to get the word out, but if we do a partnership with this place, we could even get the word out tenfold. So what are some things that communicators should look at?
Sure. I mean, some of the things I think about when we're establishing partnerships is there synergy, right? Do we have value alignment, brand alignment in terms of what we're looking to do? Sometimes the biggest partner isn't the best partner. Sometimes the smallest partner isn't the best partner, right? So it's looking at all partnerships with a fresh lens and really understanding, the impact that you're trying to make. In our experience, we've made greater impact working with smaller partners than we have made with some of the bigger partners that we work with, right? And that's not true 100% of the time, but it's just understanding that sometimes the bigger partner might not be the best, and sometimes it may be the smaller partner. So that's one thing that I think as communication professionals are looking at, brands to reach out to and people to collaborate and work with. Don't write off the smaller partners. As I mentioned earlier, value alignment and brand alignment is critical. You can't achieve the mission that you're trying to achieve if you don't have the same values or there isn't synergy between the brands. I think having preliminary and exploratory calls are critical, right? Knowing who this partner is, right? Doing your Google research and whatnot, because you might know something about a partner, but without doing a little digging, it might end up being a landmine, right, that you weren't well aware of. So really understanding the track record and the history of the work that partner has done is very important. And that's a lot of, the work that I do here. It's like identifying these partners. What are we trying to find a partner for? Is there that alignment? And then how can we roll up our sleeves and get the work done? So it's really getting that full engagement in what we're doing. And again, it comes across many different verticals, but we really look for engaged partners with the work that we do here at the Bronx Brewery, and not just the name partner, right? There may be some value in the name partner, right? Spreading the word, right? We live in a day and age that nobody wants to be first. Everybody wants to be first to be second, right? And so it's, opportunities like this, right? To engage with PRNEWS and some of the other outlets that we've been written up in that have taken a bet on us and subsequently have kind of helped us build our brand or help amplify the work that we've done. So those would be my tips. Again, it's homework, as I like to call it. And but when you find the right brand partners, you'll just feel it and you'll know.
That's great. And, a lot of what we talk about today is in regards to DEI initiatives. And how does that play a role in your partnerships, if it does at all?
Sure. So DEI work is critical to my work here and to the brewery. And I gave some examples around beer culture and our partnership and collaboration there. For those of you that are not aware, diversity, equity, inclusion, we just live in such a diverse world, right? If you came to our backyard, you would realize that there is not another place in New York City, perhaps the US, that's as diverse as our backyard and as the community that we bring together here. And it's important to have people from all walks of life, right? I think there are certain things that are universal, food, beverage, and music, right? And so we are fortunate enough to be in an industry where we could bring people together in that way. And that's really what we do here, right? We use beer as that vehicle to bring people of all walks of life together and opinions and thoughts. As regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, as we started off this conversation, the world is changing, right? Demographics are shifting, buying behavior is shifting. And what we do here is not because, it's what's popular and what's cool. For us, our DEI initiatives aren't a checkbox, but really ingrained in the fabric of our work. So again, looking at partners, how we communicate, who we bring in, all starts with that DEI lens, which for us are summed up in the values of creativity, community, and inclusivity. And so fortunate that we've been doing this, and we have a track record that speaks to that work. And, when you do good by the community and it's meaningful to the people that are running the organization, ultimately your company will thrive, right? So I think the big thing, and piece of advice that I would give to companies, communication professionals, is don't make it a checkbox, but really make it ingrained in the fabric. Don't invite our communities to the table, but rather invite us out to dance and allow us to have a voice in the conversation and the future strategy of the work that you're trying to achieve.
No, that's great. And, there are tons of studies that have been coming out saying that consumers now are more interested in purchasing a product where they know the owner of the product or, the distributor is very interested in, doing better, doing social good by the community. So it helps everybody on both sides. So that's good to hear. Quick question in regards to, I know there's been a lot of issues right now regarding supply chains, issues with ingredients, raw materials. Have you guys seen any issues regarding that? And how is that impacting your, a meeting of customer needs?
Sure. Short answer is yes. I think there's been a shortage and tighter timelines than ever before. Prices going up, right? You look at freight and things like that. But here, we've just been able to remain nimble and flexible, and I think that's the beauty of small teams. We've been able to figure it out, right? And whether things have gotten delayed and products that we've been trying to put out haven't gone out at the moment we needed them to go out, we still have gotten it done in a timely manner. But I would say there have been, production issues, if you will, but we've been able to navigate and charter that storm to allow us to continue to bring the best and freshest product to our community in a timely manner, while still, achieving our objectives and goals as a business.
Have you had any issues with customers just being like, hey, why can't I get this? Or, this didn't come on time, or have they all been pretty good for the most part?
I think everybody has been pretty good for the most part. There has been, fortunately, a huge demand for our product. So trying to keep up with the demand. As I said, we're a small craft brewery, so we don't have, a staff of 100 plus and, multiple facilities that are producing and brewing our beer. But we do our best to keep everyone happy. And luckily, our portfolio is segmented in a way that our year-round and our seasonal beers are always readily available. And the beers that we make more limitedly through our up-and-comer series are the ones that we're always kind of chasing month to month to get those out, which is, the portfolio that I would say is most exciting for consumers and our guests. But we've been fortunate enough to keep our customers happy.
That's good. I'm glad to hear it, because some people are having some issues. So, but yeah, I think when a customer really likes you, they'll be understanding in certain times of trouble. So that's good to hear. And finally, just any advice you have for those really looking to authentically connect with consumers right now? Just some tips.
Yeah, I would say, to echo kind of our conversation and recap, it is, if you want to engage with this community, go to where they're at, have conversations with them, have an open mind. I know sometimes it's like, oh yeah, cool, but it's not good for business. And I'm here to say, understanding your community and the diversity of the world that we live in is good for business. And it's also the right thing to do, which is why we do it, right? It's just the right thing to do. And I think we all have a civic obligation to do good by our community. And when we all do good, it's a better world, right? Regardless if you're in beer, if you're in sports, if you're in finance, if you're in marketing, if you're in communications, there's always an opportunity to do good. And so meet this community where they're at, invite them to the table. I think diverse staffs is important and critical to everything and anything you do as a business, whether it's strategy, whether it's activation, whether it's expansion. Having that voice and that lens in that room, I think provides invaluable insight. And so I urge every company out there to really invest in the Black and Brown community and invite us out to dance, not just to the table.
That's awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you, Brandon. You guys are doing great things, and I think very unique things in terms of, craft beer, and I hope that continues. We love the Bronx, being in New York, and we need more of that everywhere. So hopefully that continues, and you guys keep expanding. I'm sure you will. And thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. We appreciate that. I also want to let everyone know before we leave about the opportunity to share their thoughts in a new PRNEWS survey, which I'll share in the comments. The survey looks at PR measurement, tech, and talent in 2021. And we'd love if you could check it out and give us your thoughts. So I'll put that in there. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to be back next week on Wednesday, October 20th, featuring Rachel Horwitz and my colleague, Seth Ehrenstein. Rachel is a crypto communicator and marketer and is the managing partner for Anderson Horwitz, a venture capital firm. So she's going to speak about making crypto accessible to a larger public. Different topic for sure. So we'll see you then. Stay well. And thanks again, Brandon.
Thank you. Pleasure. Hope everybody has a great week.